just recently, Crane & Co., which is the kind of sports podcast for the Daily Wire, had Riley Gaines on the show. She's a female swimmer, and she had personal experience with Leah Thomas, who is Will Thomas. I'll alternate between those two names, but just know when I say Leah Thomas, I mean Will Thomas. And she went on the show to talk about Leah Thomas, but then also after this really insightful interview, the guys over at Crane & Co. revealed that they were going to release a Twitter thread that had some information that they had found out about Leah Thomas. And that information was as follows, that Leah Thomas actually had a private, I believe, Instagram account, private social media account, one way or the other, that had been posting consistent content about autogynephilia. And let me explain what autogynephilia is. It's a man's paraphilic tendency to be sexually aroused by the thought or image of himself as a woman, and it has been classified as a mental disorder since 1989. Now, there are plenty of people who are going to argue with whether or not it should or should not be a mental disorder, but as it stands, autogynephilia is a sexually deviant mental disorder. And in this private account, that was the handle for this private account was Leah Timas, Thimas. And Leah, and it was obviously connected to Leah Thomas and his real account, where he was just putting very banal stuff on his public account, but then this private account had all of these autogynephilic posts. Now, I feel like it's only right to show you these things, but fair warning, disclaimer here that what you're about to see is really gross and very disgusting. So you can fast forward this if you want to, if you're listening to it, and especially if you're watching it. But I do believe it's important to show you what Crane & Co. revealed. So here in these posts, you can see that Leah Timas was liking and or posting things about a man dressed as a woman and getting aroused by those things. These are specific AGP posts, autogynephilic posts, that are glorifying this sexual deviant mental disorder. And then finally, you'll see here that Gwen, who is the male partner who says he is a woman, the male partner of Leah Thomas, showing a picture of him holding a glass jar with water in it, which supposedly houses his former testicles. And so he kept the twig but got rid of the berries, and here he is celebrating the removal of his testicles with this post, as you can see on the screen. Now, we know this is not the behavior of a person who is mentally stable. This is the behavior of somebody who is deeply, deeply troubled. And here's the real problem. We've taken people like Leah Thomas and others around our nation and who have this sexual deviant mental disorder. And because of our desire to pat ourselves on the back and to virtue signal, we've unleashed these sexual deviants onto a group of unsuspecting women in their locker rooms as they undress. And you can see that from the source, as Riley Gaines talks about how it made her feel the first time a grown 6'4" man disrobed in front of a bunch of young girls.
But the thing is, so of course we knew going into the meet we would be competing against each other, but we were not forewarned in any capacity that we would be sharing a locker room. And so the swimming locker room, it's not necessarily a place of modesty. You've grown up swimming, especially when you're at the elite level that we were. You put these suits on that are like skin tight. It takes like 15 minutes to put these suits on. So it's a process to which, of course, you have to be undressed. But as a girl growing up in that environment, you become okay with being vulnerable in that situation because everyone there is in the same situation. And it's a place of chatter. You get to see your friends from all over the country who you haven't seen in so long. And so I was in the locker room, obviously putting my suit on, and all of a sudden it got dead silent. I turn around. I mean, this person's towering over every other person in the locker room, drops the clothes, full male, like a fully intact male with male genitalia. And almost subconsciously, you just cover. Like, it's just a subconscious inherent feeling when you see a male with male parts watching you undress.
So as you can clearly see, we're growing up in a broken culture. And when we see things like what is happening at Asbury University, I think we should jump in with both feet, because it is the only cure for how broken and messed up our backwards thinking culture is, and how messed up our abortive sexual deviant culture is. And this is the culture, by the way, that our kids are growing up in. So that brings us to the third and final point. So it helps us think. And then secondly, we have a broken culture, so we need revival. And then the third thing is that because we have a broken culture, that's the culture our kids are growing up in. Now, I have a golden rule here, and I'll call it the golden child rule, not because Eddie Murphy is involved in it whatsoever, but because it involves children in the golden rule. And the golden rule, as you know, is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then the golden child rule is do unto others, children, as you would want done to your kids. And I can only say this, as far as the golden child rule is concerned. If I had the option to allow my kids to go to any other university on the planet, or to go to Asbury University right now, if my kids were old enough, I would say, I want my kids at Asbury. I want them to experience that. And I would be, quite frankly, upset with the person who suggested that anything that was going on there was wrong, or was evil in any way, or was heretical. If my kid was there and experiencing life-changing things that were helping him become more aware of God in a culture that is incredibly morally and spiritually bankrupt. So I just think, although not the most conclusive, you should apply the golden child rule to some things in life and say, would you want your kid to be a part of that? And if the answer is yes, well, then you should think about endorsing that. And then I'll just finally end with this personal story as we kind of close out our thinking about the Asbury revival and how much our culture desperately needs it. I had a skeptical pastor when I first became a Christian who went to the Brownsville revival. Now, he did this before I started going to the church, by the way. But he was skeptical. He went to Brownsville because some of his church members were going there, and he wanted to check it out, and he wasn't sure if what was going on was biblical in nature, and he wanted to just see if there was fruit on the vine at Brownsville. And this is a revival, by the way, that took place in the mid-90s, I think, early to mid-90s, and this is in Florida. And so he went there skeptical, but I can only tell you, as anecdotal as this may be, that he came away a true believer and somebody that had been touched in such a special way that when he came back to his church, it changed everything. In fact, the church was a Southern Baptist church that then became a independent church. And I'll just be very honest with you that a lot of the things that happened in the aftermath of that pastor going to that experience at Brownsville were kind of messy. Some people left the church, some people didn't like it, but there was a lot more who really, really did. And that church is still alive and thriving today. But when I went to that church in the early 2000s, it was there that my life was forever changed. It was forever changed because there was something special about that church. That church had this kind of quintessence, this essence to it that when I went there, it wasn't like any other church I had been to ever before. And I can honestly say that I think I was saved in the midst of a revival, which absolutely changed my whole understanding of what is possible in the Christian world. I saw things that have forever changed my life, and even things that I haven't seen since there. That church impacted me in such a powerful way that I needed it to at that time, because I had been in church my whole life and most of it was boring and I couldn't stand it. And then I went to that church and it was different. It was life-giving, and I was forever changed because one man who was a little bit skeptical about what was going on decided to lean into what God was doing, all because he understood that the next generation needed God. And boy, was he spot on. So as Asbury kind of goes away from the public conversation, I'll say I, for one, will miss it. But I also think that it did leave at least this impression, I hope, in your life, and I think it did in mine. Nothing will stop us from pursuing revival in our own homes, in our churches, and in our workplaces. And by God, We need it. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely want to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.